Good afternoon. We are now with you with Richard Watson, who is a futurist, a thinker, an author, and a speaker for our Human Resource Conference coming up in 2nd and 3rd of May. And I'd like to welcome Richard here with you. Hi, Richard.
Hi, thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We're really looking forward to welcome you in the HR conference, but I think it's a great opportunity for us and for our viewers and for our participants in the conference to connect with you with this live webinar. And as we know, you will be speaking about digital versus human and the future it implies in the HR conference. And I wonder, what made you choose digital versus human, such a dichotomy?
Well, I think it's the big battleground of the future. I mean, there's a lot of big trends impacting work. You've got globalization, you've got ubiquitous or global connectivity, hyperconnectivity, you've got demographics, which in Europe as a whole, the aging workforce, aging customers is pretty critical. Sustainability is another big issue. But I think the biggest of the lot potentially is around automation, robotics, and particularly artificial intelligence. Now, there's a lot of nonsense spoken about this, and I think we're becoming needlessly alarmist and anxious to some extent, but it does have the potential to seriously change the nature of work, who works, etc. And my big concern is whose interests are being served here. Does digitalization, artificial intelligence enhance or diminish the human experience at the end of the day?
So what I hear from you and what I understand, we are going through a major change driven by technological, maybe revolution, we could say. And that revolution actually has potential implications for our humanity. And what I heard from you is that you were curious about how this change will affect humanity. And what is your conclusion? What does it mean for us as humanity before we move into human resources and the workplace, this digital transformation?
We don't know. I mean, we need to have more discussion about what this is for ultimately, whether or not we will allow this to happen. I mean, I'm hoping that the future isn't the sort of duality of digital versus human. It's digital and human. And particularly with artificial intelligence, it's really good at the stuff we're really bad at, and vice versa. So we should, in theory, be able to collaborate with these machines and create a wonderful future. But the problem is the imperatives of capitalism, which are all about short-term profit and efficiency and productivity, they may suit corporations. They don't necessarily suit us as individuals. I mean, the big story a few years ago was potentially a very large amount of people losing their jobs due to automation. I think that's a little bit exaggerated, to say the least. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And I think with previous technologies, it's allowed us to become more skillful, to do our jobs better. And it's not a new thing to say that the technology is changing things. I mean, we've had technology changing things for a very, very long time. I guess it's the scale of this, the depth of this, the speed that this could potentially move that's alarming.
And in between your lines, I heard a couple of times, other than the alarming tone, I heard that it is important to understand who this is for, or who suits better, for which audience that it suits better. So can you elaborate that a little bit more? Should we understand that there is a potential from the technological revolution or technological movement that it will take away some of our freedom, or it will become oppressive, or it will take some of our humanity? Should we hear that from what you heard, what we said?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this technology is being developed in California by a very small number of young white males, and the sort of things that benefit them and interest them aren't necessarily the things that interest or benefit the entire world. A lot of these technologies there's no discussion. I mean, in the UK, there's a lot of talk about smart cities, and in particular, obviously, the self-driving cars. There hasn't really been a discussion about whether we want this. I mean, I think this will definitely come. Yeah, I mean, whose interests are being served here? Is it purely the corporations, or is it benefiting people in a sort of more general sense? We are beginning to have that question asked and that discussion occurring, but it's not happening as much as it should.
And do you have an opinion at this stage? Do you have enough data to have an opinion at this stage? Who suits this more or better, the corporations or humanity in general?
It's
Or
not easy to say. I
pure,
mean, convenience seems to be a very, very strong driver in a lot of markets. Sort of ultra convenience is emerging as a trend. People don't seem to have any patience anymore. They're desperately trying to save time. Although if you look into it, I'm not quite sure what they're doing with this time they're allegedly saving. But I think it probably benefits profit-seeking corporations more than it benefits individuals. There's a lot of stuff that just frankly doesn't need to be done. There's a lot of stuff that if people were just a little bit more patient, we wouldn't need all of this technology. So I think it's essentially benefiting a very small number of corporations.
so, and what does it mean for the rest of the corporations, these changes? So, if we can imply that this would benefit a few number of corporations in California, Silicon Valley, or few hubs around the world, and we are addressing the corporations at the moment based in Turkey with their human resource managers. What should we tell them that they should be prepared for? What does it mean for them?
Well, assuming the world moves in the direction that some people expect, so it's going to become more virtual, more digital, more accelerated, there's going to be more artificial intelligence, so on. I think the key thing is to focus on what AI can't do. Now, it's not necessarily a very big list. There's some people saying that there's not a lot that AI can't do, but I think there are some areas that will remain a human preserve. I mean, things like creativity. Empathy is a really critical one. If you want to be a successful manager or certainly a leader, you have to be empathetic to people. Morality, to some extent, common sense. But I think the big shift is probably to some extent away from IQ towards EQ. I think we're going to, humans are very good at emotional work. And a lot of work, actually, to be fair, is quite people-centric. And that's one of the reasons I don't think a lot of jobs are going to disappear. But we should be teaching people all of the stuff that the machines, even when they get incredibly sophisticated, are going to struggle with. So that, yes, that's sort of, I'm not saying we get rid of IQ, so traditional intelligence, but we need to supplement it quite significantly with more focus on EQ. So being good human beings, being personable. I mean, a lot of work involves either managing or selling. It's not just about intelligence. It's about persuasion and things like that. It's about inspiring people to do things. I think those things will very much remain human.
So the deeper qualities of being human will emerge and will become more visible than some technical, mundane tasks or skills. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if you are doing a job that's quite routine, I mean, if you are sitting all day staring at a computer screen and inputting information, that job, to be fair, probably is going to go. And that's not a bad thing, because that's a pretty dull piece of work. That's pretty boring. And it might free you up to actually deal with people more directly. Yeah, so I mean, it's not all bad news by any stretch of the imagination.
So I think it will, in a way, dignify the value of human being. I mean, it will take us to a higher place if we can embrace that in a right way.
I hope so. I mean, everyone's talking about the rise of the machines at the moment, and I think at some point, it's very difficult to sort of be precise about this, let alone certain, but maybe in sort of 10, 15 years or something, I fully expect to see the rise of the human. We are going to appreciate what humans are really, really good at. And one of the great benefits of AI, and we've got to be careful about how we're defining AI, because we talk about AI as though it's something that hasn't arrived yet. AI has been around for decades. What we're generally talking about here is artificial general intelligence, where machines are as good as humans everywhere across the board. Now, some people think that's coming in about 15 years. I'm very skeptical that we'll even ever get there, because I think you may need consciousness to get to AGI, but we will see. But if it does happen, I think it'll shine a very bright spotlight on what it is that humans are uniquely good at. What are we here for? So we almost get into this sort of philosophical discussion. And that would be a great thing. That would be a really great thing. On the other hand, you know, if we take a lot of jobs that are very interesting are actually quite hard, and if we make them easy through the use of machinery, work is going to become less satisfying. So that's something else we need to worry about. We shouldn't remove all the difficulty from work.
So if we come to a future like that, will we have human resource managers as we have them today?
I'm pretty certain we will. I think people are going to become the greatest resource. I mean, they already are to some extent the greatest resource on planet Earth, and managing them is going to become more important. I think the number one job of any corporation, whether it is a local baker or Google, is attracting and retaining talent, key talent, in a global, hyper-competitive marketplace. And bear in mind the demographics here. We've got a lot of aging going on. We've got shrinking workforces, declining workforce participation. So there is more competition to get people. So acquiring them and hanging on to them and working out ways to do that, and that links into mission and purpose and narrative and a bunch of other stuff, is going to be really, really important. Just one rather amusing comment you probably won't like in this instance, but I did hear recently of a small company in London that had fired their HR department. It was 3 people, and they were spending the equivalent money on employee benefits, and the employees were loving it. But I'm not suggesting that's necessarily a way forward. No, I think it's going to become much more strategic and much more vital in the future, the role of HR.
That's very interesting to you. I've been in this profession more than 25 years, and after my 5th year, I started hearing that the HR is going to disappear in the near future. And you know, every other 5 years, I kept hearing that, and we always gave this bad news and potential threat to our HR audience. And now we're giving that with AI, but it seems like the profession is enduring in different capacities and evolving. And what I heard from you, when we will have a future where the human skills, the true human potential, will be more visible, HR may even have almost like a sage-like role in the organizations, because I heard you talking about mission and purpose, true human potential. So that's going to be very interesting and exciting, also very challenging, because it will push the human resource managers from their comfort zone if they are used to doing only routine things.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to lose a lot of things. I mean, I think a lot of the hiring will be automated. I mean, it already is to some extent, although that is problematic because a lot of the algorithms used to sort through video CVs contain biases. But and we know we've got the emergence of quite sophisticated workplace analytics, but maybe that frees up HR professionals to be more of a sort of inspiring figures, to resolve disputes, which is a particularly human thing. I mean, it's very hard for machines to inspire. It's very hard for machines to get involved in emotionally based disputes and so on. So I think it'll become, on the one hand, it's going to become more high tech, but on the other hand, it's going to become more high touch HR. There's going to be a lot more face-to-face interaction with people.
We had a speaker a few years ago in our conference. He talked about, he had a book called Power and Love. And he was describing power as the ability to get things done, and love as the energy to bring things together that are seemingly apart. And what I heard from you, I think the technology will take most of the power-related, action-related, mundane tasks, and we will be, I think, in charge of more of what he would call, Adam Kahani was our speaker, what Adam would call love, where, you know, connecting people, connecting ideas, inspiring, listening, bringing things together, bringing people together, which are all acts of love. And that's also, I heard kind of an affirmation of that from you.
They're all sort of acts of emotional intelligence as well. There was a very interesting article in the New York Times a month or two ago, and it was talking about students learn best from teachers they like, and they learn incredibly well from teachers they love. And it was suggesting that we need to redesign schools, but also workplaces to encourage empathetic relationships. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Fantastic. And you mentioned about an extreme example where a small company fired their human resource department and replaced with employee benefits. Do you have examples of companies, teams using this new technological change in a positive way, in a generative way, which would kind of inspire some of our participants?
Not really, in a funny kind of way, and most of it seems to be operating in the opposite way. I mean, one of the problems with work at the moment is just the stress, the pressure, the anxiety, the fact that we can take work home with us now. We're never disconnected. And some of the things I'm quite interested in are, I think it's Siemens in Germany, where if you go on holiday and you send somebody an email that's on holiday, your email is deleted, because they actually want them to rest and relax and recharge themselves. Atos, which is a French technology consulting firm, is trying to get people 1 day a week at least to actually go and talk to people in person rather than emailing or texting them, or failing that, at least phone them up to get more direct communication going on. People like Singapore Airlines, I don't know if they still do it, but they allegedly used to hire purely on personality, on the basis you can always teach the skills later. So there's some really interesting things going on around building sort of human capability on the sort of more emotional end of the spectrum, encouraging people to disconnect. There's a lot of interesting initiatives around mental health that I'm beginning to see. I like the idea, it's an old idea, but I like the idea of 3M and Google, where people get a percentage of their time to do what interests them. So you might get 10 or 15% of your work week you can actually spend on a project that potentially has nothing to do with the company, just something you are personally interested in. So allowing people to sort of realize their passions and so on. So there are bits and bobs going on, but I'm not aware of too many examples of where it's almost the absence of technology that's emerging as a trend, not the use of technology to achieve certain ends.
When I hear you, I think two things occur and emerge. One thing is we are hearing from many people, many thinkers like you and others, authors, about the scarcity of our most precious resource, which is our attention and focus. So what's happening in the technology, like your Siemens example, requires us to take measures against protected spaces where we can focus, go in-depth reflection or thinking or resting. Because I had read an article from a design ethicist from Google, and he was actually admitting that the way most of the technological processes are designed with the notifications and everything is very much like the slot machines. So the notifications, in a way that works like, we always want to look at our phones or computers as if we're going to see 3 cherries, on the slot machine. And when we see a notification or a like or something, it gives us almost the same hormonal reaction of this short-term joy. And this is very, very dangerous, because it makes us to live on a very shallow level of work, where we don't really produce things, but we just manage things and notifications. Yeah. And that's to me is dangerous, and it implies a lot of things for us as HR managers. And it takes me to Cal Newport's work about deep work. Actually, he asks a very simple question. At the end of your career, would you like to have answered 2.5 million emails and notifications, or would you like to have produced something that's useful for your company, for your work? And if this is the latter, we need a different lifestyle. And I think what you address is very, very significant from a HR practice, creating work environments, work cultures where we can produce deep work.
Yeah, I think to some extent, I'm being a bit silly here, but to some extent, work has been redefined as the ability to get through your email inbox, which is ridiculous. And I can remember back in the mid-1980s, we didn't have computers then. I think we were more productive. we were more focused. There's a lot of research around multitasking, and if you've got more than one screen open at once on your computer, that's equivalent to a loss of 10 IQ points, which is like being awake for 36 hours straight. And there is a real clash there, and this is back to that duality of digital versus human. Facebook's business model wants to grab your attention and have as much of it as possible. That's how they make money. Now, that's great for Facebook, but if you're actually trying to do something else at work and you've got Facebook open, that's not benefiting your work productivity at all. And it's not just a question of to some extent, getting the balance right and just maybe switching things off at a certain time or on a certain day or at weekends or on holiday. That's all a good thing. But I think we have to fundamentally renegotiate our relationship with these kinds of technologies. And my gut feel is if we did things slower, we'd do things better. And if we tried to do less, we'd probably get more done in a funny kind of way. And there's a lot of thinking going on at work, but it's quite shallow. I'm quite reactive and quite short term. And I'm really worried about the loss of really deep, sustained, reflective thinking because of these constant interruptions. We're suffering from information overload. We're constantly interrupted. We're not quite sure what we should be paying attention to, what's real, what's not real. And I think at some level, particularly if you're involved in any kind of creative work, you do need periods of silence, periods of solitude. And it's really interesting. I mean, you talk about Google. I met somebody from DeepMind, which is their AI division, not very long ago. And I met them at a conference, and they were writing on sheets of white paper with a fountain pen, which I thought was so strange. Like, that's the last thing I'd expect somebody from DeepMind to be doing. And I got chatting, and
it's like the old book behind you.
They're saying there's quite a lot of us like this. We're all quite Luddite at heart, And his great phrase was, "I find all of the phones and the computers, they scatter my brain," which was a wonderful phrase. Now, you can operate with a scattered brain up to a point, but if you're trying to think very deeply about long-term strategy, or you have a major crisis on your hands, I seriously don't think you can deal with that with two computer screens open, a mobile phone, a landline phone, and somebody shouting at you in the background. You can't do it. You have to get rid of that clutter, that disruption. And there's been some interesting articles very recently in the newspapers about this as well. A lot of these Silicon Valley heads of engineering, they're sending their kids to schools that don't have technology. They're disengaging at weekends or after certain hours. They're buying dumb phones rather than smartphones. There's something going on here.
So what I heard from you is unplug. I heard a number of things from you for as kind of future advice. First of, slow is the new fast. Less is more.
Yeah.
And unplug is the high tech.
I'm not suggesting you unplug all the time. I'm not suggesting we smash these things up. I'm just saying that maybe when you arrive at work, rather than instinctively sitting down, putting headphones on and opening a computer, maybe spend 60 seconds thinking about what you're going to do today, what you're trying to achieve. Or maybe you only pick up email at certain hours. You don't have it constantly on, so it's constantly coming in. Or maybe you have a day a week where you don't use any digital technology. It's just trying to find the right balance and finding pockets of fast, pockets of slow, pockets of digital, pockets of analog, and thinking quite deeply about, well, what am I trying to achieve? And where is the best place to go to achieve that? What would be the best technology to use to achieve that?
Fantastic. Richard, thank you so much. I think we are end of our time, but it's been a wonderful chat with you, and we are looking forward to welcome you in our Human Resource Conference and Future Work Summit in Istanbul on 2nd and 3rd of May. And thank you for being with us again.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's been nice talking to you, and I can't wait to come over to Istanbul in early May. I think it's going to be the perfect time of year.
Yes, we're looking forward to that. And thank you for all our viewers for being with us today. And we will continue in the coming weeks with our webinars with the speakers coming to the HR conference. And we wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.